Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus episode with Jeff Campbell and Simone Sciarrati. I probably murdered your name there, Simone. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Very cool to be here.
So Simone is an engineering team lead at Meltwater. He has worked with distributed systems from online gaming to data-intensive applications, while participating also in the many changes happening in our industry, the software development industry. At Meltwater, he's been focusing on building a platform to make life easier for the development teams. And Jeff, an habitué here on the podcast, is an Agile coach who considers the discovery of Agile and Lean to be one of the most defining moments of his life, and considers helping others to improve their working life, not simply to be a job, but a social responsibility. Amen. He's also the author of a book we've published a while back called Actionable Agile Tools, which you can get on Amazon or directly from the author at bit.ly/AAT book, all lowercase, all one word, AAT book. So guys, you're here to talk about a particular approach that you've been working with there at Meltwater to help teams go beyond the traditional component team structures. But in this case, you actually go beyond the concept of feature teams. That's very interesting. What is that approach? Let's break it down for our listeners.
Yes. So in our case, for our own team, we felt like our approach is more oriented to the empowered product teams, as aligned to the inspired book. And the reason for moving to that approach is that we felt a bit of a disconnect between the different part of the teams. And generally, you are composed of engineering, QA, agile coaches, product owners, but we felt like these parts were not really working well together. We felt like there was, as on the engineering side, we weren't really feeling part of the product discovery, and the product had a bit of a problem understanding the reasoning that we would bring up as engineering, and this made the team not work as a whole altogether in the same direction.
So you talked about empowered product teams there, Simone. What do you mean by that?
So the way we moved is that generally we came from a place where we had the product part of the team that would go and do product discoveries and then come to engineering with a set of discovery results, and mainly with like a proposal of a roadmap. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to execute on it. And that on our side, we felt the need to be more involved in that. So the way we changed this around is that we basically made this part of the day-to-day business. So product is brought inside the team, and we share our results and our ongoing efforts during our stand-up. Anything that is ongoing in product land is actually tracked as an objective, like any other roadmap objectives that we have. And so this is a continuous in-sync process. So every day we're in sync. Every day we know if there is a new discovery coming up of conversations with other teams. Our customers are internal teams, so that's really easy. They're really easily reachable. And this while previously we were doing this like in a bit separate, and then we would come together at certain times during the month, but we wouldn't have enough context, and that would generate, I think, the kind of disconnect that we would see. Well, now everything is tracked and is in sync every single day, because we were also became more active on the product side and participated in customer discoveries and experience firsthand what the customers were actually asking us.
And I think this is something that you see happen sort of whether by accident or through the best of intentions of everyone in the team, with the product owner set up a lot. You have the product owner who spends their days sort of doing the research and talking to the customers and gathering all the stuff, and then they want to get it into as good a state as possible, so it's something that teams can sort of just grab and work on without having a lot of outstanding questions. But then, there's this disconnect because they come with everything prepared and ready to show you, and they've done all this work, and they're excited about it, and like I've figured this out and this is the right way. But because the team doesn't have that context, then they start sort of questioning it because they need to understand it better. And I guess in our case, that caused a lot of tension because it felt like, I think from the product owner's standpoint, it felt like there was a bit of a lack of trust, because, they're saying, I've done all this work and I figured all this out, but now you don't actually believe me, which wasn't really the case, right? It was just that sort of lack of context that was the big issue.
So you guys, what you guys are describing are little bit like, these empowered product teams are like a little bit of the original Scrum product team idea, where the product owner is working every day with the team rather than, going off and doing whatever user research and even usability research and working with design people, and then somehow magically come up with a series of stories that represent the perfect product at the end of that, what many people call front end process.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of one of the keys here, right? Is it doesn't actually differ that much from what was sort of originally intended in a Scrum approach. It's just the bringing it to the forefront by having it worked on as part of the actual development, having those things on the board, talking about them every day, brings a lot of that information more to the forefront and stops that disconnect that's so sort of common in many teams.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a revolutionary approach. I just think that we adopted some tools to make it very clear and explicit and somehow inevitable in the way we work.
So let's go through some of those tools there, Simone. What were some of the tools that you guys adopted that helped bring the product owners closer to the product development day-to-day work and make them perhaps even feel part of the team?
Yeah, and that is actually a very good point, because the feedback that we get from the product owner is actually, yes, now she feels part of the team, like everyone is going in the same direction. But the approach is very simple. I mean, to get this continuous sync, we basically, as I said, we decide together what is the information that we need to gather in the next cycle of these customer discoveries or research, and that becomes something that is on our roadmap. And it's also tracked in the tracking system of choice. So every day during stand-up, we discuss that. So everyone is on top of what is going on for product, and it's also, and the other way around. We discuss the engineering work. And then we stopped using in 2 weeks cycles, but we made it a bit longer. And the reasoning for that is that we felt that it was too much context switching on a 2 weeks cycle. So we now work on a 6 week cycle, and once we decide the goal for that 6 week cycle, and then we tend to create pods of people, like in our team, a couple people that can consistently work on that objective for the 6 weeks. So there's always someone that can work on that, despite being on call and so on, and you can move along that objective, and you don't have the context switching. And then at the end of it, we have a 2 weeks period of cool down, where we basically can spend our time either on research ourselves in terms of technical new things, or technical debt, for example. And every 2 weeks we work with OKRs as well. So we use OKRs to define our objectives, and we have a 2 weeks cadence check-in. So we very quick and formal discuss what's the state, if we think we're gonna achieve what we set up to achieve. But one thing that we don't do is scope exactly to the minimal detail the work that we're gonna do. What is the the work that we're going to do technically to get to the objective. We get the objective as the high-level result. And then we agree on the problem that we're going to solve. And then it's the engineering team is empowered to find the best technical solution to reach that objective.
And I think that's one of the sort of keys that a lot of teams have difficulty with, whether you call them OKRs or you would call them acceptance criteria or whatever you call them. It's about sort of finding that right level that the objectives themselves are about the customer's problems rather than implementing the exact solution, and getting it to that level so that it gives the team the best ability to maneuver and solve the real problem rather than implement this exact feature.
And if I can add, one more thing is that I think this process basically makes everyone invested in the solution. So since we all agreed and we all actually backed the solution on this objective, we're going to agree. There's a nice quote in Inspire that she built a team of missionaries, people that actually want to get there because it's their own interest. That's what they want to get. It's not someone that they've been told to do.
Absolutely. So when you talk about we don't scope the detail, we define the objective, do you mean that, you might have what many teams would call like an epic agreed, but you don't actually go and scope out all the stories before you start that 6-week cycle?
Exactly. So we tend to do that. We define a high-level objective, and then we define the key results associated with that. And then that's the starting point. So the name of the objective that we have defined becomes the name of the epic. But we're not going to try to scope in there every single story that we're going to do because, at least in our experience and for our own experience as a team, we would spend a lot of time trying to do that and then redo it every week because you discover new things. There is something new coming up. You decide that you find out that way is not really the perfect way and you would go another way. And then there's a lot of time wasted. And also, what is the gain? If we trust the engineers to actually go in the direction and we check in every 2 weeks, and also even during stand-up, we check each other between engineers and product owner. Okay, are you sure you have to do that to get to this objective? Then we sort of raise the trust and we remove a lot of work that it's not really valuable.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of an approach we discuss in No Estimates also, which is define the goal by defining the problem to solve, not the list of stories or the detailed tasks that we need to deliver on, because that you discover as you go, right? But you also mentioned something I want to explore a little bit more. You said we create pods of people. So walk us through the structure here. How large is the team? How many pods you usually create per each 6-week iteration? And what do those pods actually do in practice?
So we're a small team. We're 4 people, 4 engineers. We're 6 people in total, but we're 4 engineers. And 1 person is always on call. So there's kind of less engineering power there. But we try to split in 2 pods, and we might have more than 2 objectives for the 6 weeks if there are smaller objectives, but each pod starts with 1 single objective. It's not because it's 2 people, they start working on 2 things. And the goal is to have the knowledge share amongst 2 people. So for the project can go on, as I said, even if someone is on call or if someone leaves the company, there is always a backup. And also because it's nice to pair. If we were to create 2 pods also allows us to carry 2 projects along at the same time. And these 2 pods take the objective and they define the first steps. So the first 3 stories that we're going to work on is these 3 things, and they put it in the story tracking system. And then we discuss every morning. So at stand-up, each pod reports on what's the progress on what they're doing, and so that everyone is in sync. And at that point is also a very good time to question some directions that we're taking. So we tend to encourage, checking each other on what we're doing so that we don't get out of scope and remove what is not perfectly aligned with the goal that we're going to achieve.
And then once again, also every 2 weeks, we have a slightly broader conversation about the larger overarching objective and whether, scope needs to cut there or needs to be added, and if it's sort of creeping, and do we really need to do all that sort of thing. It's sort of everybody's responsibility to continually question if we can do that in a smaller and more effective way.
I guess, now that I think about it, it's 3 pods, because there's also our PO is in its own pods, and we sort of jump in and out when we have the customer discovery. So there is actually the product owner also has objectives for the team, and we jump in and out. So there's actually kind of 3 pods.
And one thing that hasn't really been mentioned, which I think is worth bringing up as well, is the amount of effort that our PO puts into trying to use data to guide decisions and actually gathering statistical information rather than something that she thinks is important, or, as is so often the case, being driven by whoever makes the loudest or the most public request, or is even the highest ranking person in the hierarchy who makes the request. She's very good at making sure to gather data and make sure that we're not solving problems in that way.
So you guys are describing a team, and you've talked a lot about how you work, and also the idea of the pods and working towards goals rather than stories. But you're describing a team that actually works to enable other teams in Meltwater to deliver their products. And I believe you call this a platform team, correct?
Yes, there's many definitions. We've been in talks with other companies to define, and I think we came up with the name Platform for Productivity. There is something on our blog, but the point is basically at least in our interpretation of it, is a team of that provides tools and that remove work from other teams. Basically, it's a process of removal. If you don't have to manage your infrastructure, if you don't have to think about which CI/CD pipeline to use, then it's less work that you need to do as a team, as a product team, and then you can focus entirely on the business case that you have at hand.
So it's like you help remove work from other teams, or reduce the work that they need to do in order to deliver their products, correct?
Yes, that's entirely correct.
Yeah, as we call it, the paved road.
The paved road, indeed. And actually, when prepping for this episode, you guys talked about the process of establishing this platform team and how it actually helped improve performance overall. So walk us through that process. How did you guys come about with the idea? How did you get started? And of course, some of the benefits that you have observed since starting this team.
I think it's been somehow, in a way, by chance. I mean, the Meltwater started as a kind of process to move to autonomous teams at some point between 2015 and 16. And at that point, we still had large amount of infrastructure that was serving, and products basically that were serving other teams. And this was like, a logging infrastructure, metrics infrastructure, deployment infrastructure. So as part of moving to autonomous teams that would manage their own, would be completely responsible end-to-end from the code to the infrastructure, we still had this kind of products or internal products that needed someone to take care of. And that's basically how this team was born. And at that time, even because like a few of us came from the technical operations, the concept of product team was a bit alien to us. And I have to say, we focused a lot on the technology of it, like we're developing this technology or that technology. And it's only when we were joined by Amr and Jeff that we basically did that click in our head. I mean, we're not building a technology, we're building a product. So what we're doing is we're selling a product that needs to solve a problem for other teams. And I think since then we started embracing very much the product mentality. So go out and do discoveries, understand what is that is making life difficult for other teams, and then based on that data, make a decision. What is the next step that we should do? And one clear example of this is when we, with autonomous teams and going to the cloud, there was like a scroll of new technologies for deployments. So you could there's a lot of options, and we use pretty much all of them. But then this became a pain point for teams, because now they were not only working on their business case, they're also having to manage this infrastructure, and that's a boring, repetitive, and really not nice task. So we set out to build a platform for deployment so it was easy to use, and that would actually remove that pain from teams. And this is how we built our Kubernetes infrastructure. And that is just advocating for it, showing the benefits from it, and getting people to choose to come to your platform.
And that's a key point there. We talked a lot about this in the episode that I did with Amr, which I'm sure you can link in the show notes. But is this idea of us needing to win people over to the products that we provide? We don't get to sort of centrally mandate. Now everyone in the organization needs to use Kubernetes to run their products. We have to get people onto our platform by building a solution that they actually want to use. And there are many other teams who still use other solutions. The vast majority, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, the vast majority now choose to use the products we provide, but that's because we provide a solution, that they want and that is actually beneficial and useful to them, not because we sent out an email one day saying this is now how everybody needs to do this. We had to sort of slowly sell them our products and make them our users.
That's actually a very interesting perspective, because in many platform teams out there, handling infrastructure, they look at themselves as Simone mentioned at the start of his answer, as operations teams. They don't feel that they are providing a product necessarily, they're providing a service. But at the end of the day, it is a set of technologies or stacks that others need to use, and it needs to be unobtrusive, right? It needs to get out of their way and let them deliver whatever they are trying to deliver to their customers. And I'm really interested, Simone, in your perspective about that mind shift. How did you see the team moving from service to product and become, as you said, having that click and starting to go out and understanding customer pains and solving for those and so on?
For me, it's been a revelation. So it was really, really interesting because, as I said, when we started, we were really focused on the technology we were running. It was still a product from others, but we were interested in the technology. I'm going to do this technologically interesting thing, and I'm going to make this thing better. But we weren't really asking the question of what problems are we solving. And I think this was, as I said, I think there was a lot due to Amr coming on board and basically advocating for this, and also showing the way. And it wasn't even in that case, it wasn't imposing on us to do this, but it was just showing this is how you discover. And it's also an extremely interesting situation, because on one side, sometimes you would want to be able to mandate because that's easier. If you mandate, you don't have to prove anything. But on the other hand, it really makes you build a worse product, because if you're not listening to the challenging questions that your customers are asking, then you're not gonna build like a very interesting product. And that is very challenging sometimes, but it's also extremely interesting. And it really, I believe that it makes you build a better product, because because people have to choose it. You have to solve a problem. Otherwise, they would choose something else, and they're perfectly right to do so.
And it changes the sort of dynamic of what's important in what you deliver as well. I think you see this a lot in a lot of different kinds of systems, but in sort of centralized IT systems at companies, for example, or one example as a consultant, I see it in companies' invoicing systems. When you're building it as this is to solve my problem, then you tend to mandate things that make your job easier, right? I picked the solution that's actually easiest for my team to manage, because that's the best solution from my standpoint, right? While it may not be the best solution for your customer in the job that they're trying to do, it's the thing that causes me the least headaches. And when you view it as a product that you're delivering, you don't get to make that choice in that way anymore. You have to make the choice of, this is the thing that will make the most of my customers happy and win the most of my people over to my system.
One extra step is when we started also participating as engineers into the customer discovery. And that's illuminating, because there's a lot of things and assumptions that you have on what is the best way to do something. And then you get told firsthand that you're actually wrong. I really don't want you to do that. Don't even think about that. So there's been actually cases where we thought something would work, and this is exactly what customers want, and then we go into customer discovery and we're told explicitly not to do that. But this is the huge value of this, of participating, because if we were doing it separate and then we were coming together and discuss what we're going to do, then we would have, it wouldn't be pretty, because we would come with our own idea that we've been thinking is good, and then the discovery would come with other results, and then you have, there's a very, very high level of trust and discussion in that it's much better to be part of it, and then you just get it firsthand, and there's no discussion.
And then I think another thing that helped a lot in the sort of understanding our customers and what they were asking for was what we had called the sort of 360-degree enablements, which is really just a fancy way of saying that the team went and sat with users, with customers, to help them actually migrate over to our services. We would plan 1 or 2 week events where we would go with a specific team or 2 or 3 teams and be there on site with them. This was back when you were actually able to fly to places and physically meet with people. And we're still doing it digitally, but in those days it was a little different. And so then you're on site with them and you're watching their day-to-day struggles and watching their day-to-day pains, and that makes a big difference in sort of learning what it is they actually want as well. And even prior to that, now I should give Simone credit on this too. I was in one of the first sort of what we called ops-enabled teams in Meltwater, and this was before this foundation team, as we call ourselves, even existed. But Simone was one of our operations guys, and we were trying to get it so that we were allowed to deploy to production, sort of get those keys handed over to us. And we were using mob programming in the team at the time, and Simone came over and sat with us for, I don't remember if it was several hours a day or if it was even constant for a few weeks, but was sitting there at the desk with everybody else, seeing the struggles that they faced. So actually being there with them. And it's funny, just to jump back to the earlier discussion, it's very much the same problem as that with the product owner that we described earlier, right? If you go and you build the product for a month or a month and a half by yourself, and you're very proud of the solution that you've built and delivered, and then you show up and the person says, well, this isn't really what I wanted to do, then you're going to kind of get a little defensive and a little bit aggressive around it because you've already worked so hard at it.
So that's exactly, I would like to go full circle and come to the observation that from my perspective, what you guys did is take the feature team idea and turned it all the way up to 11, and you asked yourselves, what's the product we are delivering, and let's make sure that whatever leaves our team solves a problem for our users and our customers, rather than, feature teams are an evolution from component teams, right? Component teams is where you guys started. Let's just improve the technology. Let's just tweak it to make it better without really listening to the customer feedback, without doing discovery, right? That's the component team. Then you go to feature teams where you do some customer discovery, but you're not really looking at the end-to-end because you're working on a feature. And you guys went and took it one step further and said, no, we own the whole service that the teams use. And we want to make sure that the teams get value out of using what we provide, because they're not mandated to use it. They could go and get something else, right? So for me, what this discussion kind of brings up is this aspect that I see in many successful Agile teams, which is just twitching the knob a little bit to the right, going all the way to 11, and seeing, okay, so how can we make this better? And you guys started by saying, Jeff, you said, we incorporated some of the deployment work into the team. And then we started this episode with Simone saying that we incorporated the product discovery into the team, right?
Yeah. I think I only even realized that full circle as we were sitting here talking. It occurred to me that it was the same sort of an issue.
So, of course, this is not, I'm sure this was not a bumpless ride, right? I'm sure you guys had a lot of pushback, a lot of puzzled faces, a lot of questions. So, for those of us listening and wanting to take our teams all the way from component to product teams, what can we expect? What are the things that you already know we might be facing as we start talking to the stakeholders and to the teams?
So I think one thing that's really important is the first thing is the teams need to want this themselves. The development teams need to have already felt some kind of pain and have a desire for this. It's again that sort of ivory tower problem, right? Is if you decide that it's important to have a platform team and then you go and build the product and deliver it to them before they've even understood what the pain of putting stuff into production themselves looks like, then as the expression goes, you're going to have a bad time. So I think there's already a need to have some of the teams using a DevOps approach before you start providing this platform solution to them. Otherwise, they're not going to see why it's useful to them.
Yeah, I think there's also inevitably, if you come with a new way of doing things or with your own product, you're asking someone to change something. So you're asking people to do work to come to your platform, and then you're gonna get questions from, very legitimate questions from the engineering themselves, from the whoever the engineering managers. Why should I stop working on this feature and spend time moving from this CI/CD to this other CI/CD? What's the benefit? So in that, you really have to make an effort to show the value of it. You have to have a very clear case of what is the value, how is that going to save time, why is this a good investment, and so on. And we got those questions. So it's one part of the things, one part of that we work on every time we have a new product is what is the value? How can we express the value? How can we make the value of this thing clear to everyone so that people can decide to use it?
How about internally, Simone? Did you get those questions from inside the foundation team as well?
Oh yeah, we try to question ourselves every time. It's not that like we always agree on what is the step, but the good thing I think is when you make the information circulate, when you get the view of the customer, you really start being invested, and as a part of the team, you start caring about it. So it's less about you and more about the success of your team. And so we call it very often disagree and commit, as in it cannot always be my decision. And there is no title that counts actually in that decision. It's not like the highest rank or this or that. It's a team decision. But when you make the decision, then everyone backs it, and everyone works in that direction. And then we will measure it. Were we right? Were we wrong? What can we do better next time?
Another thing for this sort of pushback against teams investing time that I think is vital to point out is having some sort of executive sponsorship is very valuable. To have somebody at the sort of highest levels of the organization who's it's one thing to have a discussion with a team's product owner, but if that product owner has a boss, somebody needs to be having that discussion with them as well. And we did an earlier episode, which I think is aired by now. Well, by the time this episode airs, it will have definitely aired, with Scott, who has been our executive sponsor, who's at one of the highest levels of the company. So he can always be there advocating for why it's important to get our teams to spend time doing this, why that investment is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the integrating of the PO, because as you said, they have a boss, and usually it's even a different boss.
I think it also brings out like a different angle. You can come and say, this is an important thing that we should do. But also it works the other way around. You can get actually the question, why can you explain it to me? How can you explain the value of this to the rest of the business? If you cannot explain it to me, then how can we express this to the rest of the business? So it works both ways. It's a good checkpoint there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the link to the episode with Scott where we talk about this, how to get executive commitment and management support for the changes that are necessary is already live, and the link is in the show notes so people could go and listen to it. Guys, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end. I feel this conversation could go a long time. I got an idea for a blog post from component to feature to product team. So definitely we'll be writing about that. because I think that what you guys talked about is something that our industry needs to slowly move towards. Now, not 100%, nothing is 100%, and not all teams can go all the way up to 11 when it comes to delivering a product. But especially for internal infrastructure and internal services, I think there's a lot to be learned from this episode. So thank you very much. Before we go though, guys, let's start with Simone. Where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
I think just Google my name. I am at That's Modua in Twitter, but I don't tweet that much. And there's also, we have a blog as Meltwater, and there is we have a public repository for the presentations that we give around. So that's a good place to, when we go around and we talk about our experience and we share, then we tend to have that available in our GitHub repository. I will make it available.
Absolutely. We'll put all the links on the show notes.
You can see not just Simone, but many people from Meltwater talking about these topics. So
absolutely. How about you, Jeff? Where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
As always, the easiest thing is to find me on rebelalliance.se, as in a famous space opera that I won't name for copyright violations, but very similar. And then, of course, if you're interested in my book, that's available through Oikosafi, and it is bit.ly, bit.ly/AAT book.
All right. And we'll put the link to that also on the show notes. Guys, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.